Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Contrarians. We have a special Contrarians Presents episode today. We have an interesting topic that was actually put forth by Peter, I believe, and voted on by the patrons. This came in, I think, third place last month. So we're doing it at the beginning of this month because we did a lot of topics last month. I think we're doing a lot of topics this month too. But today we're talking about the Kiss solo albums again. I think we've talked about this topic a couple of times on the channel, but this time we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to go around to each one of our panel members, and each one of us has picked their best songs from, well, the rules were, the way I did mine was I created two sides to a Kiss album that would have came out in 1978, and I picked at least one song from each solo album, and I also created a single A side and B side, and I picked at least one song from each solo album, and basically it's kind of like if I was going to create my own Kiss album out of the solo albums. So that's the way that I kind of formatted mine. And I think everybody kind of did something similar. Somebody might have broke a rule or two here or there, but we'll find out. But what I'm going to do is, to start with, I'm going to throw it over to John, and John's going to give us his 1978 Kiss album, and we'll start from there. And if you have anything to plug, John, I know you have My Music Corner.
Right.
Plug away at the end of your little share.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've got my music corner of the world. So I don't have anything coming up as yet for the channel, just other than guesting on some of the other guys' channels here. So looking forward to all of that. Okay. So my approach to this was looking at tracks 1 through 10 on all the solo albums and saying, okay, what's going to be what would be my one slot, my two slot, from each album. And that's kind of how I approached this, and thinking, well, I know kind of in my head what I want. So I'm thinking like Dynasty with an extra song, because that's how the songwriting and vocal duties were split up in that, on that album. Yet Ace had 3, Peter had 1, Paul had 3, Gene had 2. So I'm just giving, well, anyway, I'm going to go into this. So the first leadoff track is going to be Tonight You Belong to Me. I'm going to follow it off with Speeding Back to My Baby. Going into Ain't Quite Right. 4, we finally get a Gene song with Tunnel of Love. 5, That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes. That was always my favorite song from that album. Always. I don't know why. Can't say I've listened to the rest of the album since, but I like that song. Side 2 kicks off with New York Groove, Hold Me, Touch Me, Man of a Thousand Faces, followed off by Mr. Make Believe, ending off with Fractured Mirror. And that would be my 10. So if you kind of look at how each song is on the albums, you'll know, like, Speeding Back to My Baby's track 2, Ain't Quite Right's track 3, etc., etc. So that was my approach to it. So short and sweet.
Nice.
Pretty solid.
Yeah, doesn't sound
now,
like
now to actually listen to it, because I haven't actually done that yet, but that's going to be my next thing, is at least hear how that flows. So,
what would your single be?
I probably would keep New York Groove as the single. And I think just to show Peter the love, I'll put That's the Kind of Sugar Papa Likes on as the B-side.
Nice. Awesome.
Bold move.
Good job, John. You started yours off just like mine, actually, your first 2 tracks, but I'll get into mine in a bit. David, why don't you take it away, David? Let us know what your Kiss solo album is from 1978, and if we could find you anywhere, anything you want to plug.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on today. I feel I'm waking up here on the West Coast, so it's a little early, so the sun's not quite up yet, but nothing gets me up faster than a Kiss discussion. So my track list, I kind of approached it a little bit different, but in order to sort of give myself some parameters to work with, I kind of sort of limited. The Paul's album is sort of a special album for me, so I had to limit myself. Otherwise, it might have been Paul heavy. So I kind of limited, that to 4 tracks and not try to do anything more than that. And give and kind of rank. I sort of, in order to give myself some parameters, I kind of rank the albums the way that I like them, the way that I prefer them. which is Paul, Ace, Peter, and then Gene. So that's just kind of my taste. And so I said, okay, if I assigned 4 tracks to Paul, 3 to Ace, 2 to Peter, and 1 to Gene, how's that going to work if and just to kind of narrow it down. So it kind of worked for me to do it that way and plug things in. So I kind of did it a little bit, kind of like a record, side A and side B. So side A, lead off track, could have gone a couple ways here. Rip It Out or Tonight You Belong to Me. And those were kind of neck and neck for me. I went with Rip It Out. I think it starts, I like the way that Tonight You Belong to Me starts kind of mellow and then kicks in. But, to me, Rip It Out of the gate, just a kind of a punch to the gut. And I like that. So I lead off the album with Rip It Out, follow that up with Tonight You Belong to Me. In the third track on side A, was tough for me. I went with Move On. It could have very easily been Ain't Quite Right there. I think maybe I'm so used to those two being together, they work for me. Tonight You Belong to Me, followed by Move On. So I went with Move On in track 3. Track 4 figures is a good slot for a good Peter song, change of pace a little bit. I went with You Matter to Me. Could have gone Don't You Let Me Down there, but I kind of listened to them. I playlisted these things and kind of listened to it, and I went with You Matter to Me in track 4, and then finishing side A, picking it back up a bit with New York Groove. Flipping that over, track 1 on side 2, I went Radioactive. I thought give Gene some love there, and also kind of interesting way to start side 2 with the way that Gene starts his album with sort of the sound effect and the demon and Gene there leading into Radioactive. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to maybe start a side 2 of a record. Track 2 on side 2, back to Paul with Wouldn't You Like to Know Me, and followed by Snowblind from Ace's album, and then finishing off the record with a couple of tracks. I kind of toyed with the idea of going with it's a kind of a Peter track to end the record, kind of something mellow. It's often used, to kind of end an album with a ballad. So I went with I Can't Stop the Rain, really a departure from a song on a Kiss album, but I thought it's a really well written song. I like it. Good Peter vocal. He really delivers a ballad well. Peter does. So I thought I went with I Can't Stop the Rain, but I put it in the 9 slot, and then I finished the album up with Goodbye from Paul's record, which is I feel like a strong closer. Closes Paul's album. Paul used it to close his solo tour. It just seemed like a real kind of a goodbye, but not, goodbye for now. So kind of even the positive, upbeat kind of closer. So kind of to recap, Rip It Out, Tonight You Belong to Me, Move On, You Matter to Me, and New York Groove on side 1. Flip it over, Radioactive, Wouldn't You Like to Know Me, Snowblind, I Can't Stop the Rain, and Goodbye on side 2. I didn't pick a single, but if I had to pick one, I think I'd go Rip It Out for side A, flip that over, sort of the B side of the single, Move On.
Wow. Nice list. Sounds like you put a lot of thought into it. My list is actually quite different from yours. You picked quite a few big songs that I actually didn't put on mine. But actually, why don't I just go next? Okay, so for mine, I tried to sequence it kind of like the way I thought a Kiss album would sound. Kind of like, I think John mentioned kind of like Dynasty in a way. So I was trying to sequence it like that. But I started my album just the way that John did. So I put Tonight You Belong to Me first. I feel like that's just seems like a good album opener for the whole thing. Then I put Speeding Back to My Baby second, because I think it's a nice kind of like mid up-tempo Ace track to kind of keep the album moving. Then I threw in there See You Tonight by Gene, because I like that kind of Beatlesque sounding song by him. My 4th track is another Paul track, Ain't Quite Right. I like that tune a lot. And I'll come back to that one because that's going to be on my single. Then I put Love in Chains by Paul. So far now I have 3 Paul tunes, an Ace tune, and a Gene tune. I feel like that's kind of how you would see a side 1 around this era of Kiss. For side 2, I started off with Rip It Out because I think Rip It Out's an awesome song to start a second side with. Then I have Take Me Away Together as One from Paul. So now this is the fourth Paul tune, but it's that one's I like that song because it's a little complex in the arrangement, I guess. It's a little ballad-esque, it's a little heavy in places. Then I have Snowblind by Ace, because that's probably my favorite song off all the solo albums, or at least it was when I first heard the solo albums. I think that's just like a killer tune that deserves to be on the album. Then for the Peter tune, I put Don't You Let Me Down. I know David passed on that one. I just like it. It's groovy. It's cool. And then to end the album, I have See You in Your Dreams by Gene, which would be interesting because that was the re-recorded version, right? They already had done See You in Your Dreams. You never really saw something like that on a Kiss album before, but it would be an interesting way to close the album. For my single, I actually, just to be interesting or to do it a little different, I put Ain't Quite Right as my A side, just because I feel like at the time, it's kind of groovy, hooky, and it kind of reminds me of something that Fleetwood Mac might have done, and they were huge at that time. So like that's why I kind of put that as my A side. I don't know if that really would have been the A side. And then for my B side, I probably would have put Peter's Don't You Let Me Down, or Gene's See You Tonight, because there's always something weird on the B side. That's my Kiss album from 1978. I know Joe's going to disagree like crazy, so I'm ready to hear what Joe has to say.
All right, so are there rules here, or aren't there rules here?
No, you can make the album whatever way you want.
Okay, so if there aren't any rules, this is super easy for me, because Ace Frehley's album is just about perfect. If there aren't any rules, then it's super hard, because Ace Frehley's album is just about perfect.
We want you to use your head a little bit, so maybe we should have some rules. But if you break a rule or whatever.
Here's my non-rules album. I'll take Ace Frehley's album, and then I'll end Goodbye by Paul Stanley. That's 10 songs right there. Okay. Now, if I need to choose one song from each album, I mean, I let's see. Yeah, I don't know what I would have to. I would drop New York Groove, believe it or not. I mean, even though that's the single, and Goodbye is a great song by Paul Stanley. It's really difficult, because that Ace Frehley album is so perfect for me. Let's see, Peter Criss, I would add Tossin' and Turning, just because when I watched that live show from Largo. From 1979. I think it's a kick-ass version. I know it's not as kick-ass on the album, but I cannot listen to Peter Criss's solo album still. And almost as equally as Gene Simmons' album, it's hard for me to listen to. But I would have Radioactive on there. So I would pick Radioactive, Tossing and Turning, and Goodbye from Paul Stanley's. I mean, Paul Stanley's is a great album, but it doesn't even measure up to all the songs on Ace's album, because, like I said, Ace's album is a perfect album for me. So I would add those 3 songs. I don't know what order I would put them in, but what Ace songs I'd have to remove: New York Groove. Let's see. I'm going through the track list now. Sorry. I'm in Need of Love, probably, and then you would have 10, because there's only 9 songs on Ace's album. So I'm in Need of Love and New York Groove I would remove and put in those 3 other albums. Sorry, people, but that's the way I feel, because Ace Frehley's album is just about perfect for me. And that's where I stand. So there you go.
So your album would be like a Ace Frehley solo album featuring some Kiss members.
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. In a perfect world, it would keep Ace Frehley's album the same, and and the last song would be Goodbye by Paul Stanley.
That's the perfect way to end it.
Yes.
Nice, Joe. Thank you. Is there any place we can find you?
Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation channel. We're going to be on next week talking about Jack White. Fantastic. Just saw him live. What an incredible show. What an incredible artist. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, you've been wanting to talk about Jack White for a while.
Oh, yeah. I'm just,
Cool.
fighting at the pit.
He's giddy. He's giddy about it.
I'm very giddy. It was a fantastic show. And
new album, Fear of the Dawn, worth checking out.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to throw it over to you next, Reed. Take it away, Reed.
Oh, well, I think I know why Marco is throwing it over to me. So let me make some general comments about the solo albums. Now, Marco and I did a long form chat where I picked my favorite solo album, which is Paul's by a country mile. And Peter and I recently did a chat on indispensable band members on his Rock Daydream Nation. That's kind of, we all guessed on Peter's channel. Thank you, Peter. I think these are terrible albums by and large, with the exception of Paul's album. I think a band is a type of alchemy. It functions because you have all of the members together, and no starker example of that exists than the Kiss solo albums. On their own, these guys just don't have the chemistry that they do together. And while that's starkest on Peter, who is easily the most limited member of Kiss because he was never meant to be a hard rock player. He's kind of a rhythm and blues soul kind of player. And Gene, who intentionally did a deconstructionist album, he wanted to make an album that was the least Kiss-like he could make. I just read a book recently called They Just Seem a Little Weird, which has a lot of stories about the recording of the album. And, you know, Gene wanted to do his Beatles album. And then you get to Ace and Paul. And I don't think, you know, Joe B and I are on exact opposite sides of this coin. I think Ace is not a good musician. I think he's a rarely, somewhat talented guitar player. He's a horrible songwriter. He's a terrible vocalist. He's no better than a garage musician. But people like him because his music is simple and it's energetic, and sometimes that's enough. His music is the most similar to the early Kiss stuff because it is simple and energetic. And Kiss were not great musicians. They didn't really start being good musicians until Dynasty. Whereas Paul's album is very much more an AOR album. It's not that Kiss sound, but I'll get into some specifics later. But the guys made these albums with studio musicians, right? I mean, really phenomenal players. And listening to these studio musicians play and then listening to the Kiss guys play, you're like, wow, the difference in musicianship was amazing. But it was when you put those four guys together that they did their best work. On their own, it really shows up their limitations. Nonetheless, pardon me, I have never thought in terms of albums. So I thought in terms of a CD. So instead of having an A and a B side, I've got 12 tracks. And I'm going to open up with Radioactive from Gene Simmons. For one thing, because I think it's the catchiest song on Gene's solo album, but also because it opens with just over a minute of useless noise. And if you put that anywhere other than at the very first track, that minute of useless noise is just completely out of place. I guess if you were doing, pardon me, if you were doing an album, you could flip it over and start side two with it, and that would be fine. But since I'm seeing it as a CD and it's all just one linear process, it's got to be the very first thing. My next track is Tonight You Belong to Me by Paul Stanley. And I thought about leaving that one out to reduce it because I've got 12 tracks. And I thought about reducing it to 10 or 11. But I left it in there specifically because I don't remember the session musician who's playing guitar. Steve Lacy, I think. Listen to the solo on Tonight You Belong to Me. It's phenomenal. It's very long. It's very melodic. It's got some really, chopsy passages in it, but it sounds like a little mini song. It's everything you love in a solo, or I love in a solo. Sorry. And then next, I'm going to put Snowblind. And listen to the solo that this studio musician plays in Tonight You Belong to Me, and then listen to Ace play. And you go, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, Ace can't hang. Now, I mean, you can enjoy his music. That's cool. I'm not the music taste police, but he's a limited musician. Snowblind has a riff ripped off from Edgar Winter. I can't stand Ace's vocals. And then his solo is the same 3 or 4 licks he plays on every solo. Okay, it's high energy. Fine, move on. I'm including Tossin' and Turnin' because I also like the live version that's at the Largo show. Joe, I was at that Largo show when I was a kid, so I love having it on DVD. I'm just kind of rotating through them in this order again. So I go back to Gene, and the best songs on Gene's album for me are the mellowest songs. Things like Man of a Thousand Faces, but I didn't like the way that felt with the rest of the album I was putting together. So next I'm putting in Tunnel of Love because I'm trying to keep the energy level fairly high on this album. Going to Paul Stanley with Move On, and then New York Groove from Ace Frehley. And I love New York Groove because it's not an Ace song. Clearly, he didn't write it. He's never played anything that sounded remotely like that song. It forced him to get out of his comfort zone and yet allowed him to sing about something he loved, New York City. I think it's a fantastic song and easily the best thing he's ever recorded. After that, I'm going to Peter Criss's Hooked on Rock and Roll, which has a much better title than it does. I think the song is a little low energy. It's mid-tempo. Peter doesn't really stretch out. But again, his best songs are also his most mellow, and I don't think they fit on my album, although I'm only going those two from Peter. After that, I moved to True Confessions. Again, an okay song from Gene, but it's one of the more energetic ones, and I want to keep that energy level up. And then what I think is the second best song from Ace's album, which is Wiped Out. I love that pseudo surf rock kind of fake out instrumental because he opens up with an homage to the song Wipeout. And then he goes into Wiped Out, which I think in this one, his weird kind of adenoidal New York accent actually really works for that. I was wiped out. I mean, I like that part of the song. And I'm closing with two Paul selections, which is Wouldn't You Like to Know Me? And my personal favorite off of the track, which is It's All Right. And I believe the story with It's All Right is Paul, somebody taught him open G tuning, which is how the Rolling Stones did a lot of songs. And he wanted to write a song in open G tuning. And that song doesn't sound anything like the Stones. It's very Paul Stanley, but it's the highest energy tune on the album. And I want to end with a good high energy track. Although I also thought about going mellow, but I thought, no, let's try and keep the energy up on this album. If I were going to do a solo, you know, the only solo that was semi-successful off this album was New York Groove, which was very successful. I think Radioactive also got some airplay. And then on the flip side of that, I may go with the idea if you put your worst song on a B-side, which means I'd put Hooked on Rock and Roll as my B-side.
Nice job, Reed. Now we're going to get a bunch of negative comments because of you.
I know.
I thought it was great that Reed had one positive comment about Ace. I couldn't believe it. I heard something kind of positive.
What's he ever done to you, Reed?
He
Poor old
exists.
Ace.
He exists and gets way too much love. That's what he is.
I think you're totally off on this. I think Ace Frehley is brilliant. He is the sound of Kiss because once Ace Frehley was out of the band, they lost all their personality. His playing, his style, his sound. Anytime you hear Ace Frehley, you know it's Ace Frehley. And all the great players have a unique sound.
I agree with that. But he was 70s
Kiss.
He was 70s Kiss. I prefer 80s Kiss because it had better talent, better songwriting, and Bruce Kulick wipes the floor with Ace Frehley.
Bruce could be any guitar player on the planet. He's just another guitar player with no sound.
All I have to say is Parasite and Rocket Ride are the two best Kiss songs.
Joe B., you're all over it. And Shock Me.
Shock Me, yeah.
And Ace's solo album
don't get me wrong.
Solo album actually had the least amount of studio musicians. Ace played pretty much everything himself except for drums and bass on a couple tracks. So it was mostly Ace on that solo album.
That's what I'm saying.
That's one of the best, an incredible drummer on the album.
Yeah,
that's why it sounds like 70s Kiss.
Marco's
And
loving
that's
this.
because Ace sounds like Kiss. It's all Ace.
Like
That's what I'm telling you.
70s
That's
Kiss,
where the
sure.
sound comes from.
Yeah, which is the worst Kiss.
And that's what everyone likes. No one wants 80s Kiss. Who wants that? Nobody.
Millions of people want 80s
Not
Kiss.
anymore. Everybody wants. Why did
who
they
wants
do the
to be
reunion
lonely?
tour?
Because we're all old and we buy shit for nostalgia.
I don't know. I think you're out of line, Reed. I love you, Reed, as a friend and a
You're out of
colleague, but you're out of line.
You're out of order, Reed.
It's
You're out
too
of
early
order,
in the
Reed.
morning. I can't.
Here we thought Reed was asleep. No, he's not.
David, welcome to your first Kiss chat with the Contrarians.
At least he didn't pick "Wish Upon a Star" to end the album. At least he
I
didn't
came
go that.
so close.
I came
came
close.
so close.
He did
I thought about
say
that
he
too.
was he did say he was going to do that. I was disappointed, Reed.
You failed us, Reed. You failed us.
That's critics
Failed me.
corner.
All right. Thanks, Reed. I'm going to throw it over to Rock Daydream Nation, the reason we're here today, Peter Kerr. Tell us
thank you.
about your 1978 Kiss album.
Yeah. I disagree about Ace because I think Ace is the man, really. He's got the click, he's got the groove, he's got the feel. I think that Ace out solo album is outstanding. It's the Ace and Paul albums that are heads and shoulders above Simmons and Chris. I've listened to all four of them, and getting through the Simmons and Chris album is a bit of a chore. You had to go through Studio 54 stuff, funk, R&B, disco, doo-wop. It's not Kiss, and you can see like Love Gun went to number 4 in the US. They were at the top of the pile. They had a lot of momentum, and then they basically did a vanity project. And I will agree with you, Reed. I think this actually, by them making 4 solo albums, was probably the beginning of the slide because it diluted them. And if you're used to Destroyer and all those classic Kiss albums, and you're going to pay money and buy Peter Criss and Gene Simmons, you'll go, WTF, what's this all about? It's a bit much to take. But my opinion is that the Ace album is really stellar. I played that the other day, and I messaged Marco. I said I was going to be like you, Joe B. I was going to put all the tracks just from top to bottom. Stanley's is really good as well. So how I've done it is I've done the track listing 1, 5, 6, 10 as the strong tracks, going through the Grant Arthur School of track listing, just making sure you get your hits and, gets the right balance.
Sequencing is very impressive and very important.
Grant's Rock Warehouse, just check that out.
Thank you.
Yes. Plug. New York Groove, I start off number 1. So you've got to have the big hit. Pow, get straight into it. That was the big hit. And that's what, when the DJs will put the album on, that'll be the first one that they pick up. Then I go to Rip It Out by Ace. I think that's got a great riff. That's my number 2. Number 3, Tonight You Belong to Me, Paul. That's one of his best songs on that album. So that's my 3rd. Number 4, Speeding Back to My Baby by Ace. I like that hard rock, a little bit of doo-wop, which is acceptable, but that's a good song. So a lot of Ace on side 1. And then I put number 5, The Closer, Man of a Thousand Faces, Gene. It's one of the rare shining lights on that album. And I kind of, it's got a bit of an ELO feel to it with the strings. There's so many strings and backup singers. He's got Donna Summer, he's got Cher, he's got horns, but a lot of it's just really crap. It's just putting, dressing up some really average songs. But that one really, it has the strings, it has the arrangements, but it's a really decent song. Side 2, track 1 is Snowblind. That's my favorite Ace song. I think it's a ripper. And the lyrics, it's actually probably one of the more subversive Kiss songs. It's sleazy, it's gritty, it's dirty. It sounds like something in New York in 1978. And it's the best track on the album. See You Tonight, Gene. I like that. I like how he does the Beatles and the Beatlesque and the ballads. And I think Gene, when he does that Beatlesque and ballad stuff, that brings out the best of his songwriting, like in The Elder, World Without Heroes, which is one of his best songs. And he doesn't talk about his never regions and room service and all that sort of stuff. Number 3, Move On, Paul Stanley. I like that song. Number 4, Wiped Out Ace. It's got a good little groove to it. And not forgetting Peter Criss, I finished on track 5, the closer, Kiss the Girl Goodbye. It's a bit Lennon-esque. Got a nice little bit of an acoustic feel to it, but I thought, yeah, it's a nice sort of album closer. I'm going to be a bit predictable on the single. I put it New York Groove because we've got to shift units. We've got to, get this album to sell, and I would flip it. I'd put Kiss the Girl Goodbye. You never know. The DJs might turn it over, might turn into a hit like Beth did. So there's my album. Yeah.
I like it.
Excellent.
I like the different perspectives, and I like that I don't think anybody's going to have the same album at the end of the day.
No.
Cool. All right. Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Grant's Rock Warehouse in the house. This is how I approached this. This was like really a fun topic. So I'm approaching this like I'm the producer of the record. Okay. We're talking 1978. Of course, the solos albums don't exist. So Ace doesn't get 3 tracks on a record. He didn't have a hit yet. Peter Criss, 1 track. So we're going with like the Love Gun theme. So I'm the producer. I have all the band members bring in their tracks. We know there's upheaval in the band. So Peter has his tracks. Ace has his tracks. You know what I'm saying. Everybody brings me their tracks. So over the weekend, what I did, I listened to all these albums over and over again. And this is kind of going off a bit, but I have more appreciation for Peter Criss's record and Gene's record because I hadn't really listened to him in a while. And Peter Criss's record is fine. It's just 1978 AM radio type of stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. People thought it should be Kiss. He's not into that shit. It's not, it's just, it is what it is. And I think Gene's record's very creative, and he likes the Beatles and all that. I get it. It's fine. There's some great Gene tracks on this record, and there's some stuff that's not so great. So me as the producer, I listened to everything over the weekend, and I've picked the track listing, and we're going to do a typical pre-1979 Kiss album. And sequencing is everything on this. We've got to have a cohesive album. I don't want tracks that just jump out. It has to make sense. So the strongest track on the whole batch is Tonight You Belong to Me by Paul Stanley. That leads it off. We have to have a solid opener, a solid closer for side 2, same side 1, solid opening and closing. Okay. So side 1, Tonight You Belong to Me. Number 2 is See You Tonite, Gene Simmons, which is a phenomenal Gene track. Everybody talks about how Gene was so influenced by the Beatles, but I don't hear the Beatles on this. What I hear on this is the Raspberries. Go All the Way, I Want to Be With You, Driving Around, Let's Pretend Tonight. I hear Raspberries when I hear this. And See You Tonite's one of Gene's great songs. So what would follow that really well? Wouldn't You Like to Know Me by Paul? Another Raspberries type of track. So far, we are going power pop with this lineup. If you take all these tracks together, this is a great power pop record. Number 4 is Mr. Make Believe. We've got Gene back doing Raspberries. I don't hear the Beatles so much on it. But boy, like I said, I hear Raspberries. And then the 5th track, which is another strong track from Paul, though you might think it's a wussy track, but I'm the producer. I'm picking it. I'm trying to make money and produce a cohesive record. Hold Me, Touch Me, Think of Me When We're Apart, which is Paul again, but it's got those raspberry tones. We have a solid side 1. Everything flows well. It starts off strong and ends strong. Whether you like Hold Me or Touch Me, whatever. If you look at the stuff that's coming ahead, side one on this record's brilliant compared to what's coming down the pike. If this would have been unmasked, it would have been a different game. But side two, we're starting off hard. Now, this is a little unorthodox because Ace would not get an opening track. But to me, Rip It Out is the only track he's going to get because we're in 1978. And of course, that leads off his record anyway. So Rip It Out starts out side two. You can do that on side two because it, wouldn't fit on side one so well, but side two, what a way to start out side two. The second track that follows Rip It Out really well is It's All Right by Paul, because you've got that typical Kiss rocker. It flows well. I don't have any issues with that. So number three, every Kiss album's got a quirky Gene song on it, Calling Dr. Love's kind of quirky. Plaster Caster's kind of quirky. Man of a Thousand, I'm going to put Man of a Thousand Faces on here. For one, it's got a great chorus. It's very hooky. The stuff on Gene's record is a lot of this stuff, if he would have just put these out on Kiss albums, they would have been great. Man of a Thousand Faces is typical Gene, kind of quirky, very catchy. It almost could fit on side one, but it doesn't quite hit to those standards. Side two, I think, is kind of coming down a bit, but most Kiss albums they're not all perfect anyway. So now we get to the Peter Criss track, because we're not going to put Peter's track high up here. Now, I listened to all of Peter's material. I'm going, what on earth could we put on here that would fit? Because none of it really fits. All right, I'm the producer. What am I going to look at? What song on Peter's record has the most commercial potential? I mean, we're pre-Dynasty. We're almost to Dynasty, boys, where, you know what comes on Dynasty. So I'm picking You Still Matter to Me, which is a disco-y, catchy song. If there's ever a single on the Peter Criss album, that's the single. And I think that's the strongest song. Whether you like it or not, and you think it's cheesy pop crap, Peter has a great voice. That's going to be his track, though it throws off the whole record, but you got to throw Peter a bone, and you've got to use that, and that's all he had. The final track is Goodbye by Paul, which is a phenomenal Paul Stanley track. And Paul closes the record. Of course he does. So side one, Tonight You Belong to Me opens. Hold Me, Touch Me closes side one. Phenomenal. Side two, Rip It Out, strong. And Goodbye is strong. So I think we've made a good commercial record. I think it's better than Unmasked by leaps and bounds. And it flows well. And the songs are really good because there are some really great tracks on the solo records. Do they all sound like Kiss? No, because there's all these different studio people. But if you took those tracks and made a Kiss album out of it, I think you might have had a pretty darn good record. I don't think You Still Matter to Me would have sounded like that, but you've got to throw Peter Criss a bone and you got to put it on the record somewhere. And as the producer, this is how I think the album would flow.
Hey, I like Unmasked.
I didn't say I didn't like it, but I think the songs on here are a lot better.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say.
I'd like to hear what anyone thinks.
Yeah. Anybody have any final thoughts?
No, I think you're okay on the sequencing. Again, to me, the biggest travesty about the solo albums is that Kiss never recoalesced as a unit. From the solo albums forward, on every album, it was the same thing. It was no longer Kiss. It was, here's a Gene song with Kiss backing. Here's a Paul song with Kiss backing. Here's an Ace song with Kiss backing. And they never really became a unit again, to me. And that goes all the way through the end of their career, because Dynasty was the blueprint for not just Unmasked, but also for Creatures of the Night. It was the blueprint for their last two albums, Monster and Sonic Boom. Those were, if you look at the track sequencing, it's just like in Dynasty. So this really set the tone for the rest of Kiss's career. So if you're a classic Kiss fan, I think these albums mark the beginning of the end. Whereas if, for me, they're the transition, but my transition didn't really start until Creatures of the Night, when they became, a good 80s hard rock band.
Yeah, I've got a question to everyone. If they didn't do the solo thing in 78 and they went straight to a Dynasty type album in 79, do you think their career would have gone in a different direction? Their fortunes?
You mean like if they put something else out instead of the solo albums?
They
like
had a spell. They had a spell in 1978. So 1977, they do Love Gun. 1978, there's no solo albums. It's just a spell. And then they put something out in 79. Do you think their career would have been different?
I don't think so.
For sure.
I don't think so at all. They were on a self-destructive track. So,
I think if you took
mattered.
sorry.
I think the solo albums might have made them last a bit longer, because I don't think they would have made it to 1979's Dynasty without the solo albums. That's me.
Yeah, it did sound like there was conversations around them breaking up because certain members wanted to do their own thing. But I think I kind of think maybe the opposite of Grant, that like maybe if they didn't do the movie and they didn't do the solo albums and took a break for a little bit, maybe they would have lasted a little bit longer into the 80s as a unit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I sort of think. Maybe the movie, that wasn't a good move. And as I said with the solo albums, it at the end of the day, it's a bit of a vanity project, and the quality of some of it is not that great. And a lot of the fans would have been extremely confused if they bought a Gene Simmons or a Peter Criss album, as Grant and some of you others have said, and expected Kiss, that sort of wheelhouse of Kiss.
But I don't see it as a vanity project. Paul and Gene are trying to keep the band together, throw Peter and Ace a bone.
It's a vanity project. Having four solo albums, it's a vanity project.
The other guy you have to throw in the equation is Bill Aucoin. And if Bill Aucoin was he was the mediator, he said, okay, let's do this. There were a lot of drugs here, with Ace and Peter. There were a lot of ego.
And Bill.
Paul. Yeah, and Bill. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it was inevitable for all this to happen, and it's just part of history. And
but
kudos to Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, but mostly Paul Stanley for just keeping it together. And then, eventually, that's why they're still around. But
doesn't he always? He's always the glue, doesn't he? He always keeps it together.
Yeah.
And,
think of the Kiss marketing train that was rolling at that time. They were just. There was all this Kiss marketing coming out. If they had taken the break, think of that momentum that they had been building up, that granted would have fallen apart anyway, but, as Dynasty came out. But, they were just, if they had taken any kind of break and they didn't come out with an album, who knows how many people would have forgotten about it.
Right.
That could have been a worse downward trajectory.
And don't forget, back in the 70s, you had to crank records out. It wasn't like today where a band could take 4 years off. Then we had to crank stuff out to keep everyone's interest. There's a lot of competition then.
Now let's remember, Dynasty was a huge selling album, right? Dynasty is Kiss's third best-selling studio album, behind Love Gun and Destroyer. No, actually behind Love Gun and Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, because Alive 1 and Alive 2 are their best-selling albums, but they're live albums. But what they were about to run into was what every hard rock group from the 70s ran into, and that's the 80s. And 70s Kiss, no matter how much they struggled to find a sound with first Unmasked and then The Elder, they were so out of step with 80s music. Now, love it or hate it, music changed, and they had to find a way to keep up with the times, and they were never going to survive with that 70s hard rock sound. Aerosmith died They were nowhere in the 80s until they came up with the duet with Run DMC. You know, they had to do something, and they experimented a lot. Most people think their experiments are not their best stuff, but they would not have been able to continue with that 4-piece sounding the way they did. They needed something radically different to survive the 80s.
But would Dynasty have been a big hit if they had taken the break?
That's an interesting question. I think I'd probably disagree with some. But you know, the 4 solo albums, even though they'd been registered platinum, in reality, they weren't platinum.
Oh, yeah, so many units were shipped back.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're all in the cutout
you go into
bins.
the cutout bin, and it was always the Kiss, you know, especially Gene's album, Peter's album. Yeah. And then, you know, you talk about Dynasty. I always throw it back to where I grew up in Chicago. Dynasty sold well, but man, it killed Kiss in Chicago until the reunion. They couldn't draw flies. I mean, they canceled the Lick It Up. This Lick It Up, their comeback album, they could not even sell enough tickets at UIC Pavilion. You know, they played during Lick It Up, but during the Animalize tour, they had to cancel, and I had to drive up to Milwaukee to see them. But that just killed their market in Chicago.
Do you think, Joe, it was I Was Made for Loving You? That was
definitely, yeah. Because
that was the killer.
I told this story before. I mean, where I grew up, there were literally, I got my ass kicked because I had a Rush shirt on, and a bunch of guys, a disco gang, came up to me and beat the crap out of me because I was wearing a Rush T-shirt. So it was serious stuff back then. So when you have your favorite band make a disco song, then you're really in hell. Because no one likes, the disco guys hate Kiss and the rock guys hate Kiss. I was the only guy in my neighborhood at the time that liked Kiss.
And you can see that the rock was starting to come in Simmons' solo album, because there's a lot of funky bass, a lot of Studio 54 influences. So you can see that he's starting to set up the template for that song.
Right. And then, you know, you just think about there was a changing landscape. All of a sudden, you know, guys are getting in the Judas Priest, they're getting in the Rush, they're getting in the Pink Floyd. You know, the Wall was friggin' huge. Everyone knows. I think the Wall killed disco just as much as Disco Demolition and everything. They're getting into Zeppelin more. So Kiss was kind of like, okay, you know, we don't like him anymore, and especially in Chicago until the reunion. You know. So Dynasty sold well, but it was definitely a change of dynamic. But for me, nothing replaces that 70s sound. And at the time, Ace Frehley, no, is he technically a great guitarist? No, but he brought that unique riff sound and lead sound that was part of that, what I fell in love with. I mean, the first song I ever heard was Rock and Roll All Night Live. And the reason that's such an amazing song is because they added his lead guitar to it.
And the other thing with Ace, how many kids started playing guitar because of Ace Frehley?
Oh, tons.
His influence was immense.
Yes.
That's how you can tell a great guitar player. I don't care. He's got a tonality that
no one is able to
very influential.
Yeah.
You know, I will not argue that he's influential or that he was foundational to the 70s Kiss sound. I'm just saying he's not a great guitar player. He's a worse songwriter and a worse singer.
I would disagree. I think his songwriting is amazing up until probably Unmasked, but you could say that about the whole band. But his quality output, I mean, Parasite alone, that's my favorite Kiss song of all time.
I think I was saying to you the other
Cold
day,
Gin.
Cold Gin.
I think that the Ace solo album is better than Ace's solo album in the 80s. I think I was saying that to you the other day, John. I think Ace's solo albums in the 80s were a bit sort of average. I think that was the 78 solo album was his high watermark.
Yeah, it's as I said before, I think it's a perfect album. I listen to it all the time still. I probably listen to that more than any other. I mean, Alive is one of my favorite albums of all time, but I probably listen to Ace Frehley more than that even currently. I'll throw it on a couple times a month.
Yeah.
David, you got any final thoughts?
No, this has been great. It's been really interesting to see everybody's different perspective and how they kind of approach this. Yeah, it's been really, really cool. So yeah.
Oh
All
yeah,
right,
my
well-
single.
Oh yeah.
A side is Hold Me, Touch Me. That was a single back in the day.
Yeah.
That's side A. And then for side B, I'm just going to throw Peter Criss, You Still Matter to Me on there. Why not?
Nice.
If it's a fluke hit, it's a fluke hit. Could be a double. You never know. B-side might take off.
Awesome.
You know,
All
Grant,
right.
Yes.
when you said you're going to produce this album, the first
Yes,
thing
sir.
I thought of is I got to come in and bring Grant a bunch of cocaine. You could be the producer.
Yeah. If you want to get your tracks on here, you better bring me a lot of coke.
It's the suitcase, baby.
This is going to be really cool. I'm going to do the record labels for this episode. So everybody's album, you're going to see it. So I'm looking forward to that. And thanks everybody for joining us today. It was an interesting conversation. And like and subscribe our channel if you can. It helps us grow. We also have a Patreon and things like that. And you'll find all that information in the description. And a lot of folks here have their own channels and stuff. So follow them as well, because everybody's putting out amazing content. I'm really proud of everybody. Everyone's doing a great job. So we'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Marco.
So yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.